Welcome back, Defenders. Jake here. Top story today has to be that as of this morning, Finland is officially a member of NATO. The Finnish flag has been raised in front of the NATO headquarters in Brussels. Finland is now a full-fledged NATO member with Article 5 defense protections. What does this mean? This means that if Russia ever chooses to attack Finland in the future, all of the other NATO countries will come to Finland's defense. This is a huge victory for Finland's national security. So let's actually talk about and think about why was NATO originally created and why does it still exist today? So NATO was created on April 4th, 1949. This was 4 years after World War II ended. And let's start with the question, why does it still exist? And this clip I'm going to share with you is of ethnic Crimean Tatars fighting with the Ukrainian military against the Russians inside of Ukraine. And look what they found that Russian soldiers were carrying with them. So the question, why does NATO still exist? And NATO still exists because it's the year 2023 and there are Russian soldiers flying Soviet flags pushing west to expand their borders. Now, maybe here in America, we never really took serious the threat that Russia could do this someday. Going back to the collapse of the Soviet Union, thinking in the 90s, Russia was democratizing, opening up, reforming. The idea that there'd be another major war on the European continent, we didn't believe it. However, the Baltics believed it, Poland believed it, so NATO still exists because it was never dissolved. And it was never dissolved because there were member states who still believed that Russia could do this in the future. Fly the Soviet flag and start pushing west to expand their borders. And the reason why NATO was created in 1949 was to stop the Russians from expanding. Now, when you want to call them the Soviets, whatever, it's still orders coming from the Kremlin. But in 1949, they were communists. And according to public communist doctrine, philosophy, they were saying that communism had to spread to every corner of the globe for the war to end. That the struggle of the working class was eternal, and only when every nation on the planet was communist would the war end. So NATO was formed to stop the communists, or the Russians, from expanding. That's why they really wanted Greece and Turkey in the original alliance. But even if you say, Jake, communism is gone, it doesn't exist anymore, fine. Let's go back to before the time when the Russians embraced communism, and these are the borders of the Russian Empire at the heights of their imperial power prior to World War I. When Putin is raving about respecting historical borders, these are the borders he's talking about. Finland doesn't exist. The Baltics don't exist. Poland doesn't exist. Moldova, Ukraine, Georgia. If you want to go off of historical borders that Putin is talking about respecting, then none of these countries exist. According to the Russians, they're all fake. They belong to Russia's immediate borders, or at least their sphere of influence. So why does NATO still exist? And it exists to keep the Russians inside of Russia. For 500 years, Russia has become the largest geographic country in the world by continuously attacking and invading their neighbors. Russia is the one expanding, and NATO is the one stopping Russia from expanding. So this is a huge strategic defeat for the Russians in every way, having Finland officially joining NATO. These yellow lines were the NATO borders touching Russia prior to yesterday. and this red line is the new NATO-Russian border. And here's the dirty secret about this whole war. Ukraine was never going to join NATO. One, you can't join NATO if you have an active territorial dispute, such as the Crimean Peninsula or the Donbas region. But two, every country in the NATO alliance has to approve your membership. This is why Sweden is not joining NATO on the same day as Finland. Turkey is currently blocking their application. It only takes one member of the alliance to prevent any other members from joining NATO. So politically, Russia always could have just leaned on Turkey, leaned on Hungary, or even leaned on Germany and said, don't ever allow Ukraine to join NATO, even if Ukraine was actively trying to do so. Russia always could have blocked Ukraine from joining NATO forever by just paying off one country or blackmailing one country to stop their application. But because Russia chose to invade Ukraine, because they engaged in this war, I argue that it's inevitable now that Ukraine will become a member of NATO. Just this week, Stoltenberg says Ukraine will join NATO, vows support despite Russia's reckless nuclear rhetoric. And the reason why is because of economics. So, discovered in 2013, Ukraine has large reserves of oil and gas off the coast of Crimea and in the Donbas region. This is partly why Russia is so obsessed with taking this territory. But because Russia has destroyed large sections of the country, Ukraine needs revenue in order to rebuild. And they can only generate this revenue by partnering with outside foreign investors. So they need one of the super majors like BP, Dutch Shell, or ExxonMobil to come into the country and build the infrastructure necessary to export this oil and gas to generate revenue for Ukraine. But no outside foreign investments will ever come into the country unless there are security guarantees that Russia isn't going to just attack the country again. So Ukraine can't rebuild. They physically, financially will be unable to recover from this war unless they join NATO. This is the argument that's going to be made, and you can't dispute this. Russia really screwed up if they do view NATO as a direct threat, because Ukraine will be joining NATO. The other big story that's been dominating the headlines the last couple days is this pro-war Russian military blogger killed in a cafe explosion that also injured several dozen people. So a pro-war Russian blogger died Sunday in a cafe explosion in St. Petersburg after he was presented with a bomb disguised as a gift. This blogger's name was Vladlen Tatarsky, age 40, and he was an ultra-nationalist and anti-Ukraine propagandist. And he was giving a talk about his Frontline reporting at Street Food Bar Number 1, that's a terrible name for a restaurant, in the country's second largest city. A woman presented him with a statuette in a box that apparently exploded according to media sources. So first, let's get to know this man, Vladlen Tatarsky, and let me share with you just a couple clips of how evil this man was.
Многие люди, которые испытывают какие-то странные любовные чувства к хохложителям, ну, то есть к этим, они говорят о том, что ну зачем же мы разрушаем инфраструктуру, ведь мы отступаем, а не наступаем, зачем же мы их обозляем. Слушайте, они, эти свиньи, обозлены уже и так. Это раз. Второе. Даже в обороне разрушать нужную инфраструктуру не будут работать госпиталя, больше хохлов будет дохнуть.
So this guy picking his nose on camera is arguing that Russia needed to bomb Ukraine's energy infrastructure in order to knock out the power to hospitals in order to kill as many Ukrainian civilians as possible. This is the level of expertise this guy was offering on his Telegram channel. let me share with you another clip of what he thinks about Ukraine.
Все, всех победим, всех убьем, всех, кого надо, ограбим. Все будет, как мы любим. Давайте с Богом.
So this is Vladlin inside the Kremlin shortly after the war began, saying we will defeat everyone, we will kill everyone, we will rob everyone who needs to be robbed. It will all be just as we, the Russians, like it in Ukraine. So I didn't know who this guy was because he only puts out propaganda in Russian. And this guy is a convicted criminal in Russia. He's been convicted for murder and bank robbery. And I guess he was a minor superstar in the Z world. Everyone knew about him. And while his death might not trigger a physical response, it will have a massive effect on Russians. So people generally knew who he was, but he wasn't as popular as Kremlin state TV reporters. But we have the video. Here's the video of the woman delivering the statuette, which is a bomb, to Vladlin. And let's watch 40 seconds of this together.
Настя, Настя, иди сюда садись. Садись сюда. Или вот сюда, куда ты хочешь. Давай в кресло садись. Да. Ух ты! Какой ты красивый парень. Хорошо, да? Давай, ладно. Вот. Просто, ну, золотой.
Рабочая история.
Да, все, золотой латвей. Отлично. Ну, ты знаешь, слава богу, я гораздо красивее. Да, ну ты просто кубики.
So the video is going to cut out in a second, but this is the woman who brought the bomb into the restaurant. And she's been identified by the FSB as a 26-year-old woman. But the whole situation is a little weird. So the next day, the FSB put out this clip of this woman they've identified as Daria Trepova, just asking some simple questions, and look at her answers.
Понимаешь, за что задерживают?
Понимаю.
За что?
За, я бы сказала, пребывание на месте убийства Владлена Татарского.
Что ты сделала?
Я принесла туда статуэтку, которая взорвалась.
А кто тебе передал эту статуэтку?
Можно я попозже расскажу?
Who gave you the figurine? Can I tell you later? And then the video released by the FSB cuts out. So the woman that the Russians presented as the bomber handed over the explosive-filled statue, then sat down near the bomb, survived the explosion, and then stood outside the cafe with the other survivors, not even attempting to flee the scene. So more than likely, this woman didn't know what she was doing. She didn't know there was a bomb in there. Otherwise, she wouldn't have sat near it, and she wouldn't have stayed on the scene after it exploded. So what the heck is going on with this bizarre video put out by the FSB? And Russia officially is blaming Ukraine and the opposition for the pro-war blogger's death. Here's the name of this restaurant, Street Food Bar Number 1. What a stupid name. And I think what might have happened here, let's go ahead and promote some conspiracies, but I'm going to argue the FSB killed this guy. Why'd they do it? Maybe to create a martyr for the cause. Maybe this guy had been too critical of Shoigu and Gerasimov or whoever. I don't know the specific day-to-day that this guy was posting on his Telegram channel, but there are some benefits to taking him out. And you can blame Navalny, it's the evil Russian opposition. You can blame Ukraine, try and get some of this guy's supporters to sign up for the Wagner Group or sign up for the military. And you can blame that evil CIA in the United States. When the FSB is the one controlling all the information, they can put out whatever they like. There is no independent reporting currently happening anywhere inside of Russia. And of course, the fellow propagandists on Kremlin state TV are outraged. Let me share 30 seconds of this clip with you.
Бандеровские бесы совершили очередной теракт. Взрыв прогремел в Петербурге, в кафе на Университетской набережной, где проходил творческий вечер нашего друга и коллеги военкора Владлена Татарского. Буквально 2 слова, да? Нам нужно, в конце концов, нам нужно поменять законодательство. Нам нужно за терроризм и за измену Родине вводить смертную казнь. У нас нет других вариантов. Согласен. Понимаете? У нас нет...
Of course, the laws in Russia are too lenient. That's why this cafe bombing occurred. If only the laws had been more strict, maybe Vladlin would still be alive. I'm sure these guys are tearing up over this. So maybe, yeah, the Duma just needs to pass some more restrictive laws in order to bring security and order to the Russian people. Expect more legislation soon in order to honor the fallen hero Vladlin. But a civil war is currently brewing in Russia. There are lots of factions within Russia who all hate each other. And here's a story about how the quick growth of the Muslim community inside of Moscow is creating tensions. Locals have started protesting against the construction of a new mosque close to what the locals consider a Christian holy site. So currently on Russian social media, Russian Muslims and Russian Eastern Orthodox Christians are fighting with each other about the construction of this mosque. And here are Eastern Orthodox Christian Russian soldiers filming a video saying, "We will not let our Orthodox faith be put to shame. Our brothers and sisters, we stand with you." They're opposing the construction of this mosque in the capital city of Moscow. How do you think that Muslim Russian soldiers fighting on the front lines next to these guys feel about these guys filming such a video? Here's a video of an Eastern Orthodox church in the Muslim majority region of Tatarstan currently on fire. We don't know what really happened. We'll never know what really happened, but there definitely is some tension between the Russian Eastern Orthodox Church and the Russian Muslim minority, who have been treated pretty horribly by the Russians since the beginning of time. Let's now talk about the front lines in the city of Bakhmut continues to hold. Russia is incompetent, but Prigozhin doesn't want to bother himself with, capturing the whole city. He'd rather just declare victory now. So Prigozhin says mercenaries have legally captured the city of Bakhmut. Okay, how do you legally capture a city you don't control? And Prigozhin said in a video posted Sunday night that his fighters have captured the administrative building in Bakhmut. Maybe this is like the city hall, but that's not how that works, Prigozhin. But according to the Institute for Study of Warfare, Russia has failed to achieve their goal of seizing the entire Donbas region by the end of March. So I know time has no meaning paying attention to this war. This feels like forever ago. But if we go back in time 4 months, Surovikin was the general in charge of all of Ukraine. He's the guy that surrendered the city of Kherson and stole a raccoon. And Putin fired him in December and then put Gerasimov, the chief of the army, in charge of the entire war. And 4 months ago, Putin said, "You have until the end of March in order to take the entirety of the Donbas region." This is why the Russians were pushing so hard in Bakhmut, why they were pushing so hard in Vuhledar. So this was their goal. This dotted gray line, this is the regional border for the Donetsk Oblast. And 4 months ago, this was the Russians' goal. They haven't even been able to take the entire city of Bakhmut, but somehow 4 months ago, Putin thought Gerasimov could take the entirety of the Donbas region. Wow. So here's a clip of Gherkin saying that Russia is losing. If you don't know who Gherkin is, he's a former FSB officer. He's an international wanted terrorist by The Hague, and He's really not happy with how this war is going for Russia.
К сожалению, ситуация на фронте, которую средства массовой информации всячески лакируют, крайне негативно влияет на обстановку во всей стране, во всем нашем государстве. Не побоюсь этого сказать, что мы движемся к военному поражению. Даже не потому, что не можем продвинуться в каких-то там райцентрах и за зиму не смогли отбросить врага даже на 10 километров от Донецка. И даже не потому, что оставили Херсон, откатились из Харьковской области, отошли из-под Киева, а потому, что мы влезли в длительную затяжную войну, к которой наша экономика оказалась совершенно не готова. В принципе, к ней оказалась не готова и армия, и политическая система, и персонально.
Gherkin is not making this video because he wants the Russian military to give up on taking Ukraine. He's making this video because he wants to see Shoigu and Gerasimov fired. He wants to see the Wagner mercenaries disbanded and absorbed back into the regular Russian military. He doesn't like private military groups. He still wants Russia to win this war, but he's saying the way that it's currently being fought with mercenaries and incompetent leadership and no total mobilization, Russia has no chance. Russia is currently losing this war. Another bad sign, it's not going well for the Russians. Russia confiscates the passports of senior officials to stop defections. Kremlin tightens Soviet-era travel restrictions in sensitive areas. So for the last year, I think a lot of intellectuals have fled the country, but also top military commanders, scientists, government bureaucrats, anybody that realizes the truth that Russia is a sinking ship heading for civil war, they want to get, what's it called, amnesty, or they want to get protected status in a Western country so that the FSB can't get them or their families. Let's now talk about some good news for Ukraine. And Ukraine confirms that the JDAM precision bombs are now being used in combat. There's been a couple clips on Twitter and people are asking, are these JDAMs, are they not JDAMs? But now we know that if you see a clip online and it's a pretty big bomb, then these are the JDAMs. So JDAM stands for Joint Direct Attack Munition. They are air-launched precision-guided bombs. So they got to be launched from planes, so they've been fitted with these wings and kits in order to work on old Soviet aircraft. And Poland has officially delivered their first MiG-29 jets to Ukraine. Ukrainian pilots last week went to Slovakia in order to pick up the planes from Slovakia, but it looks like Poland has sent 4 MiG-29s this week. In total, I think 13 have been promised and currently are on their way. Next piece of good news is that arms maker Rheinmetall is setting up a maintenance hub in Romania in order to service Ukrainian weapons. So here's the map where Rheinmetall is setting up the maintenance facility. They're going to have it operational by the end of this month. There are already maintenance facilities in Lithuania, Germany, and Poland where Ukraine can get tanks and infantry fighting vehicles fixed and serviced. But this is a win-win-win. Rheinmetall will get government contracts for fixing these vehicles. Romania will probably get some jobs in the local area and tax revenue, and Ukraine gets to have their military equipment serviced and maintained. On a more somber note, President Zelensky says Ukraine will never forgive Russia on the first anniversary of the Bucha killings. So it was on April 1st of last year that Russia abandoned their plan for taking the capital city of Kyiv and the territories including Irpin, Bucha, Chernobyl, Chernihiv, Sumy. All of this territory was liberated, and the civilians in this region were treated quite horribly by the Russians for that first month of occupation. And President Zelensky in his speech also said he hopes Putin will be held in a basement with a bucket for a toilet, being the criminal that he is, awaiting trial. It's a nice visual image to think about, but I do believe in the end Putin will be apprehended. Final couple feel-good clips. The first one is from a year ago, and this was Bucha in the first days after liberation. Ukrainian defenders helped a dog find its human. There was an ID tag with a phone number on his collar, and this is the moment the dog and the human were reunited. Looks like a happy dog. The final clip I have for you is a birthday celebration for a Ukrainian defender on the front lines.
А я знімаю, іди сюди! Мамці покажу! Вітаємо вас з днем народження! Давай, жара! Так, от, ви стоїть. Дуй сильніше! Дякую, хлопці!
I wish this Ukrainian defender many more happy birthdays to come. That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.